Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Our next witness is number 185. The witness is a close relative of a high-ranking religious figure in his city. For security reasons, the witness' name and identity is kept confidential. The witness voice will be replaced by the voice of a member of the council team. The council has directly interviewed the witness and verified his identity. Witness 185. The chairman would direct you to...
I beg your pardon, sorry. Witness 185, before you begin your testimony, and thank you very much for attending, would you repeat the oath after me, please? I solemnly declare that I will speak the truth.
بله. من سوگند می‌خورم.
I solemnly declare to say the truth,
The whole truth and nothing but the truth.
and nothing to say but the truth and the whole truth.
Over to you, Mr. Sabri.
Can the witness 185 please inform the tribunal as to the information you have received and how this information was relayed to you without disclosing the source of such information? This is the information about the events in Aban 1398.
بله. 98. بنده از
Yes, 2019. I am one of the persons who is a confidant of the Friday prayer leader of my district, and he informs me of all the information because of the proximity that we have and the connection that we have. He talks with me about all these issues, and I've always observed the issues in this respect.
Can you please explain what was that you witnessed yourself?
من از بله.
I will present to you some general points, and whenever you need further explanation, you may ask your questions. It was Friday when the prices of petrol tripled, and in our city or town, in a scattered manner, there were some protests in a peaceful manner. On Saturday, the following day after the announcement, the gatherings had been a bit aggravated, but they still remained peaceful until noon. And then the city became a bit overcrowded. So they closed down various centers, and people were on the street. It was 6 p.m. The city became really crowded. It was Saturday, 6 p.m. The city became really crowded. And the catastrophe started from 10 p.m. The internet was cut. When the internet was cut and people were still on the streets, the slogans started and there were scattered riots. It started on Saturday, but it wasn't yet too deep and severe until Ayatollah Khamenei, in his lessons that he was presenting, he said that the people should support the leader, and suddenly he said that I'm not an expert. And this led the city to erupt in a manner, and our city erupted even further because of what he said. And there were some conflicts. The banks were burnt down, and such issues took place, and similar issues took place. And finally, the police force used firearms, and in some parts of our city, people were being targeted by firearms. On Sunday, still the protests continued, and the Provincial Security Council was held with the presence of the governor, the Friday prayer, the commander of RGC army, the judiciary. They all gathered, and the Friday prayer leader said that I've got my own forces, and his forces were a number of rioters who used some cold weapons. I was present in the session, and with the order of the Friday prayer leader, they left the session, and many of the people on the streets were being attacked by these plainclothes people. And this situation continued in all areas and streets. We could see such conflicts and beatings up, and the protests continued everywhere. So that's why the police forces couldn't control people. They brought in some further forces. Imam Ali brigade were brought there, and another brigade was brought there. They had G's free, and they had other firearms, and they had written order to target and shoot people if they could not control them. And the police force were to support them so that they would be able to shoot people in the torso and even in the head. And in the following session, the IRGC, the Guards Corps, took the control of the meeting. That is to say, the governor did not have any control over the meeting anymore. And the Friday prayer leader told them that you should wrap up the protests, and you should force people to go home. And up until the last one has gone home, you should do whatever you can to stop them from protesting. And even if you have to shed blood, it's not a problem. I take the responsibility, and I'll be responsible for the sin. The leader is upset, and we should wrap up the situation. And finally, the situation was wrapped up in our city. What I realized based on the statistics we received, I may say, without mentioning the names of the individuals, 120 people were killed in our town or city. And this, if we want to consider the same scale for the whole country, it would be a huge number. The number of death certificates that were issued were with other titles. That is to say, the Provincial Security Council was ordering that the death certificates should be issued under other names. So the reason for the death was being written something different by the coroner's office, and the families were warned that your children are there or here, and that's their burial place, and that is it. And this situation continued. And this was about the days of the riots. After that, we went to inspect. That is to say, the leader was ordered that you should go and visit people who have been arrested. So after a few days, after 2 days, we were hearing from here and there that the people who had not been really involved, or their relatives who had a good financial situation, were able to pay bribes and bring their children out. And there were still some other people who were left in the prisons, and their situation was even worse than those who were killed, I may say. And that is to say, if they were killed, they were in a better situation than being interrogated in the prisons. So I may dare to say that their situation was even worse than those who were killed. So we went and inspected these individuals who were arrested. The prisons had a very bad situation, mentally speaking, psychologically speaking. The prisons were under severe pressure. The prisoners were taken for interrogation. They were first of all given some pills, some medicine for days, hours. They didn't even know whether it was day or night because of all the psychological pills that they were given, psychedelic pills that they were given. So the head of the prison was showing them to us. They were saying that they were giving such pills to these individuals. They were given these pills because they would be treated in a manner that they would not object later on. They would not have the capability to object afterwards. So the one in charge in prison explained to the inspectors that they were controlling the situation and they could go back and report that the situation in the city has been under control and everything is wrapped up. So the prisoners were in prison. The camera came down from the top of the cell onto the face of the prisoner. The prisoner had a door behind them. They were being monitored. And they were asked to to get blindfolded. And when they were blindfolded, the camera went up to the ceiling, and then the prisoner was guided to go out backwards. They went out of the prison, and they had to put their hands out of the prison, and from a rectangular hole, they were being handcuffed, and then they were also being the chain was being put around their legs as well. These were things that we could see, and this was the treatment that the prisoners received after they were taken to other rooms. And the head was explaining that there was a recorder in those rooms, and there were some recorders that just broadcast the sound of torture. That is to say, the sound of their families were being reconstructed, that they were being tortured, and they were being told and threatened that we will bring your family, your fathers and mothers here for torture. And some of them had even been summoned. Some of the fathers of some of these individuals had even been summoned. And even the families of those who were killed were asked to pay for the price of the bullet and also the burial. So their parents were also being summoned and taken to the prison. So they came there, and they were suppressed. They were also given some medicine, psychedelic medicine, some other depression medicine, and their case was being built up, and then they were sent to the Public and Revolution Court. And there were another group that, according to the interrogators and the interrogation team, they were the individuals who were trying to be bullies. There were people who were not ready to confess. They were resisting. So they were being taken to the suite, and they were told that they were being taken to a suite so that they will get calm and to repent and to become good individuals. So they were taken to a lobby which was black. The picture of the individual was there, and they were reading Quran, and they were distributing date. That is to say, they were trying to show that the individual is going through his own funeral. So when he went through the lobby, through the corridor, Quran was being recited, everywhere was black, and they showed his burial place, which was red, as if his blood was shed. And after this black area, they were taken to the suite. Suite is a black environment similar to a gravestone. And in that suite, they were being kept as if they had died. So the suite was like a graveyard. They were kept in the suite until they confessed. Some of them were just students, university students. Some of them were educated individuals. And those who are being monitored in these areas were being told that they were very simple individuals. After these developments, they were taken to prison for a while, and then afterwards they had all become mentally ill, and they could not make any progress in their lessons, and they were in a very dark situation afterwards. So this was the other group that I wanted to talk about. Altogether, based on the written order of the higher ranking officials and also the guidance of the religious authorities and also security and intelligence officers, these individuals, the authorities were able to control the riots in such a form. And this was the general information that I had received. It has been 2 years since the developments. Maybe I have forgotten some of the details now. But this is not something that I would ever forget. Until the last day of my life, even after my death, I don't think that I will forget these days. If you have any questions now, I'm at your service.
And can you tell the tribunal whether any of the prisoners died as a result of medications that were given to them during their arrest and detention?
بله.
Yes. The same day that we went there, there was an ambulance and two bodies they brought up, and we said, why did they die? And they said they have taken tablets called the mescalit tablets. They even showed us, and they had a cardiac arrest, and the ambulance had brought them. At least two of them we saw.
You also spoke to some of the military commanders during your meetings with them. Can you tell the tribunal what they mentioned to you about the peoples that they have killed?
They considered them to be rioters, and because they believed that they have a particular ideology and they knew that they would be supported judicially, they talked about it as a good memory, as a badge of honor. One would say, for example, I shot somebody who was on a motorcycle, and then it was announced that he was dead, or I shot them with a Colt or by a Kalashnikov at close range, and these are the things that they were recounting.
Can you explain that in situations like this, who would be making the decisions for the order of shoot to kill? Would it be at the local level, or at the higher level, or at the leaders level? And if so, whether the local authorities have any right or chance to veto the order of shoot to kill?
No. The local authorities had no powers of their own. And even if you are the commanders of the Revolutionary Guards, they would want to do it even more determinedly. The orders would come from Tehran. Some forces came from Tehran too. They had the orders directly from Tehran to shoot, and the people in charge in our city, in order to prove that they served the masters in Tehran, they would do it even more vigilantly.
Were you informed that who in Tehran had issued the order to shoot to kill?
Yes. there were two people who had issued the orders very determinedly, and the orders were so strict that that person and the religious agents that I was in contact with them, they said, hopefully we are not going to have a ceasefire, we are going to shed blood.
The tribunal may have further questions for you.
Good afternoon, witness. I have a couple of questions to follow up on those that Mr. Sabi just asked, and I hope we don't repeat, but I will try not to. I'm wondering if you could go back to what I found to be a statement worth understanding more deeply. You said that one of the things that triggered the protests, if I understand you correctly, was a statement by Khomeini saying, "I'm not an expert." And that led to the riots and banks being burned. Can you explain the context of that? What he meant by "I'm not an expert," why that would trigger this eruption?
بله.
Yes, he, among the high-ranking officials of the country, and the people expected him to come and support them. And he said, I have no expertise with regard to petrol or whether the price goes up or comes down, and I will delegate this to the head of the executive power. And that's what happened. Also, the president said he was not aware of it, and the leaders said, I am not an expert, and this provoked people. And people got upset, and they said to themselves, well, nobody is supporting us, the people in charge are not supporting us, so they came to the streets. And when they were encountered in a very decisive manner, things got worse, and everything became blood-stained, and the situation became worse. Because if Mr. Khamenei had given a proper view and he had solved the problem, none of this would have happened.
Excuse me. And then you said that the locals would not have had any power on their own to use force against peaceful protesters or protesters, that this would definitely come from a higher command. Am I correct in that? That's a correct statement.
Yes.
And so in that...
Yes, an order should come from higher ups, and when it comes, they like to show off. And they implemented very diligently. They were after receiving the order and to encounter people with much determination. We have a proverb in Persian. The Iranians say, if they said, for example, bring me a head and arm, the person would go and bring the arm and the head together. That's to say that they gave a very definitive order, and the ones who were supposed to implement it implemented even more diligently. So there was a lot of blood.
And in this case, where did that definite order come from, if you know, when it was issued? You mentioned the Tehran Special Unit. Did the order come from there, if you know?
Yes, I know that, but I prefer not to state it here. If it would be a private place, perhaps after this meeting I would say it, but not here.
Okay, that's completely understandable, and I thank you for clarifying that. I have really one other question regarding this. My understanding is that the use of force, in particular the use of potentially lethal force, could only occur if there was a certain level of violence occurring in the street already. In other words, that peaceful protests would never be a forum for the use of force. In this context, is it your understanding that even though protests were, for the most part, peaceful, that an order for the use of force came anyway, as a means to control those protests regardless of whether they were peaceful or not?
نگاه کن.
Look, what we have to consider is this. I'm going to tell you something now. On that Saturday, before internet was cut off, I was going home, and I could see people here and there, and I could see that the roads were blocked. I, for example, would say I want to go to school and bring my child home, and they didn't care who I was as a citizen. They would open the door, they would unblock it so that I would go to school and bring the child. So they would observe that if somebody had a problem, they would make sure that they would not block them. When Mr. Khamenei said what he said, and among the security people, they say if Agha, the leader, doesn't say this and that, they wouldn't do this and that. So when he said something, many of these people had to implement it. If they had not done it, then for small authorities, and I'm not even saying authorities, soldiers, even captains, sergeants, it would create problems for them if they would not implement it. So the lower level authorities, provincial authorities, local authorities, they would have to do it. And in Tehran, the higher authorities, that's to say the authorities in the Ministry of Justice and the others, they would make them do it, and for them to prove themselves, they would do it.
So is it fair to say then that on the local level, given the situation that you've just described, that local authorities, whether they're looking at some small level of violence or they're looking at a peaceful protest, would feel in these circumstances they had to carry out that order? They did not have the discretion to do anything other than that.
Well, their discretion would be that, for example, not to give tablets to people. The discretion would be not to torture people so much. They ordered it and they performed the order.
I was thinking particularly...
See why? Do you know why? Because, Madam Judge, you have to consider something. When we talk about Sharia proof or order, when it comes to you, these things happen, and they don't feel any guilt. That's to say, no matter what cruelty, they will perform it. That jurisprudent, the Sharia person, he said, don't restrain yourselves. And he was at the provincial level, he said, we are going to shed blood. You have to think about this. That's to say, he said, we don't want a ceasefire. When you want a ceasefire, okay, you have plastic bullets, you don't do it, or you do it. When you say it shed blood, it means shed blood. Go kill people.
Thank you.
Hello, thank you for your testimony. I just have a few points for clarification. In the statement that we received from you before today, one of the things that you mentioned is that because the police were overwhelmed with respect to taking care of the protest, that a few hundred people were taken onto the streets to help suppress the protests. And these people were brought out from the jails. Is this something that you can elaborate on? Perhaps you can clarify.
بله.
Yes. These were people who had long-term prison sentences, and they would have Islamic mercy on them, and they would enter the society, and they will keep them for a day that would need them. And that's what happened. They brought them to the streets and called them the militia, the Basij, but they were in plain clothes. And they had knives, they had chains, and they started injuring people. And that's to say that any place that the police could not do their job, they would come and help the police, and they would injure people and they would beat people.
Thank you. And did the order to use these people come from the local police, or was this also something which came from Central, from Tehran?
It came from Tehran and Qom. They came from Tehran and Qom. That's to say, through religious clergy, the Ayatollahs, and these are people the thugs, who surround the clergy in their meetings, and these are the people who beat people with their chains and injure them with their knives.
And to your knowledge, was this practice used in other places beyond your city? You may not know, but if you do know, please explain.
بله.
Yes.
And
it was also done in one of the big cities.
thank you.
That's to say, the people I know in that city told me, those who would surround the clergy, and they were in the security forces and were participating in different cities in Isfahan and Mashhad, they also did the same in those places.
Thank you. And I have one final question, and it regards your very detailed account of ill treatment of detainees. Clearly, we understand you cannot indicate who was in charge of the prison, because that would perhaps reveal the location. But are you able to confirm, was this a prison that was run by the IRGC, by the intelligence, or another body, or was it a police cell? Can you clarify the nature of the prison and who was in charge in terms of institution?
بله.
Yes. The detention centers that we went and we inspected, the intelligence forces in Iran, they are not like the United States, where you see CIA is involved or MI6 is involved. We went to a detention center. It was a detention center from the Ministry of Intelligence, a little bit of I talked about it, and from the command center we could see what kind of interrogation they had, and also also the IRGC. They have such a detention center in our city. I went to 3 of them. There are 3 of them, but the detention center of the police force, of course, we found out later on that they changed the lists, and they had taken some bribes from the families, and they had released some of the protesters, very few of them. But as far as the detention center for of the Ministry of Intelligence is concerned, it was very, very strict, and the worst one was the detention center of the IRGC, which is a very very horrifying, fearful detention center. Therefore, in our city, we have 3 kinds of them, and in some other cities.
Thank you. And in terms of the ill treatment that you described, was that the IRGC center or was that the police-run center? Just to be clear.
بله.
Could you please repeat your question from the beginning again?
Yes, of course. I just wanted to be absolutely clear for the description of ill treatments that you gave. Was that describing a police detention center or an IRGC detention center? Just so we are clear.
نه.
Intelligence service. The intelligence service has a detention center, and that was the place that I talked about.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I have a number of questions to ask you. I'll try not to reveal your identity. I'll try and help you as much as you can. But you sound like an intelligent person, and I'd like you to help yourself too, and tell me when you think the questions are coming close to bad things. Do you understand that? And can we try and help each other that way?
بله.
Yes.
Thank you. Now, you sound like a person with some education. If without disclosing your identity, unless you have a very special level of education or something, can you tell us what your educational level is, more or less?
I have a master's degree, and I'm studying at the PhD level.
At the what level?
PhD level.
PhD level. All right. And are you advanced in your studies there, in that degree? The way. See, there are lots of different kinds of PhD. I'm trying to understand whether you have an understanding of philosophy, because these days they call all kinds of things PhD. They call some lower degrees PhD things too for some reason. So broadly, do you have an understanding, because you're matriculated and you're a university person, of philosophy and religious philosophy?
بله.
Yes.
Thank you very much. That's very useful. Now, and of course, in every part of the world.
Is there a need for me to explain in this respect or not?
Is there any?
Is there a need for me to explain any further in this respect?
No. That answer is enough for me. And if I want more information, I will ask you. So far, so good. Say as little as you need to, and I will ask you a little more if necessary. All right? So I accept that you understand religious philosophy. And my understanding is, and there's a debate about this, that there is a close relationship always between, or almost always, between religious philosophy and political philosophy. Do you have that understanding, or do you think religious philosophy is something different? I just want to know where you come from.
من درکم اینه که
My understanding is that these two are different.
All right. We'll come back to that in a little while. Okay.
Understanding is that those who had written the religious books had no place in politics and they were away, far from politics. But at present, we see that the philosophical books that are being taught at universities are, in fact, a critique, a philosophical critique of Ayatollah Mesbah Yazdi, or they are a philosophical critique of Western politics. And the philosophy that is being taught at our universities is in this line today.
Okay. So
These are the books that we receive. Ayatollah Mesbah books are being taught, and Ayatollah Mesbah Yazdi also is a critique of Western philosophy. Do you want me to explain any further in this respect?
so far so good. These questions might tire you out a little because they're going to be hard questions. Just tell me if they do, all right? So as I understand you, what you are saying is that religious philosophy and political philosophy should be separate, but that in practice sometimes you think they get mixed up a little. Do I understand you properly on that?
بله
Yes.
بخاطر
This is because of the general policies of the establishment.
Yes. Yes, sir.
And in the educational courses that we receive, because of the general policies of the establishment, and because some religious authorities extract some verses from the Quran.
Yes.
And
Okay. So let's just get a little bit practical for a moment before I get to more theory. So there is an Imam Jummeh at every mosque in every city.
Excuse me. The connection with the witness was cut off,
Oh, right.
I'm afraid. Are we trying to get him back? Also, the detailed questions may lead some members of the government to start thinking about the identity of the witness. So if we can
Yes.
avoid getting into detailed
No, I am.
Questions.
I'm just asking theoretical questions now. Now, I will make absolutely certain that what I ask him has no application to his city and himself personally. I can tell you now that what I need to have an understanding of.
the witness is back.
Witness is back. All right. Okay. So we have an understanding that if ever you are afraid that your identity must come out, you will say so immediately, and there'll be no hard feelings, right?
بله
okay.
Okay.
سوال قبلی
In response to your previous question remained unfinished. Is there any need for me to respond?
No, I didn't hear your answer, so let's just go into it again. Let me repeat it so there's no misunderstanding. So is there, in terms of structure, there is an Imam Jummeh in every large city, more or less?
بله
Yes, we do. Even in the villages, townships, we have a Friday prayer leader.
Now, is there a hierarchy of Imam Jummeh? senior ones, junior ones, some people that are listened to more, other people are listened to less. And if there is such a hierarchy, can you just explain that to us? I want to understand where. I'm not interested in your boss in particular. If your boss has something special, I don't want to know. I want to know about generally, where does an Imam Jummeh sit?
Country.
Yeah.
In Iran, the supreme leader is on the top,
Right.
and he has a representative in every province. The representative of the supreme leader is being appointed directly by the supreme leader. So he
Right.
would be his authorized representative. Alam al-Huda, for example, in Mashhad is one of them. In other cities, like,
Sorry.
for example,
Sorry. Just
Khurasan,
hold on there a minute. Because
شورای سیاستگذاری تعیین می‌کنه.
hold on a second. If you go too fast, it'll be a bit too difficult for us to. So I understand then that there are lots of. What is the title now of the second level? I understand. Leader one, that's the big boss, right? That is now at the level that is a supreme leader.
supreme leader, and the heads of the three branches of government would be on the top. In the provinces, the representative of the supreme leader would be at the second level, and the governor who represents the president, they will become the second rate at every province. But in the country, the second rate individuals are mainly the national security leaders, the IRGC commanders.
No, we'll come back to those. Let us first just get over these structures because one needs to understand them. What are the leaders at the provincial level called? I know that the political ones are governors, and as I understand it, side by side with governors, somebody else, a religious person works, there's a head there. What is the title of that religious leader?
افراد
The religious authorities working in the governor's office, are you talking about?
I'm talking about the title of the leader of the province.
هستن که تو فرمانداری کار میکنن.
Are you talking about the religious leaders who are working in the provincial
Yes.
level?
Yes. In other words, the second in command of the supreme leader. Shall I start again?
It is the IRGC commander, and it is the prosecutor general of the province, but the representative
Yes.
of the supreme leader is on the top in every province.
Right. Now, what is he called? What is the name given to that office?
دفتر نماینده ولی فقیه.
It is called the office of the representative of the supreme leader. That's the name that is being used in every province. They even have a sign. On the sign it is written the office of the representative of the supreme leader.
Okay. Then the next question I have to ask you is, are all these people, the various leaders in the province, the representative of the supreme leader and the others you mentioned, are they equal, or is one more powerful than another generally?
نگاه کن.
Well, in every province, the representative of the supreme leader is on the top, has the greatest power. But we see that the IRGC commanders have a great influence and control over the representative of the supreme leader. So the IRGC commander's influence is much on the Supreme Leader's representative is much greater than the army commander. The army commander does not have any influence over the Supreme Leader representative, but the IRGC does have great influence. They plan, they sit together with the Friday player leader, and they decide that it is necessary to bring some people, for example, with in such and such format to here, and they plan and they implement.
Okay. So as I understand you, then we got to where I wanted to get to at last. The Friday prayer leader, let's call him that for now. There are many of those. Now, are they the next level? It is Supreme Leader, that's level 1. Level 2, representative of the Supreme Leader in the province. Now, do the Friday religious leaders, do they represent level 3, or are they at an even lower level than that?
نه
No, the leader of the Friday prayer is the same person as the representative of the leader. He is the one who comes and talks. He also gives the policy, etc. Of course, I have to add something. At times, the texts are prepared and they come from Tehran, and it comes to the representative of the leader. He revises it, he edits it, and it's going to be presented during the Friday prayer.
Okay.
That's to say that the general policies of the establishment are disseminated during the Friday prayer.
All right. Now, are there meetings between, as part of the administration, would there be regular meetings between the Supreme Leader and his representatives?
بله
Yes. Yes. Because the representatives of the leader are also among the elite, and they give annual reports, they give monthly reports, and also a few times during the year they meet the leader. When at times when the situation worsens in the provinces, they can go and meet the leader without an appointment, and they can receive the religious order from him.
So, is it true to say that, generally speaking, nothing is done without the consent of the leader? So let me put the question to you another way. You see, I had a leader in my day, and I understood my leader, and I knew what was okay with him and what was not okay with him. Now, when I have a problem and I'm not sure, then I must make sure I go to my leader to find out what I must do if there's going to be trouble, because I know that if I do something my leader doesn't like, there's going to be trouble. So whenever I'm uncertain, I go there and check, so that I don't do anything except with the consent of my leader. Would that be the same in the relationship between the Friday mosque leader in the cities and the Supreme Leader?
Not in the mosque, but
No.
the Friday prayer, yes.
Yeah.
That's to say that orders come from Tehran, general
Yeah.
policies come from
Right.
Tehran, and they are repeated during the Friday prayer. And a week later, a month later, the same is communicated to the mosques. if it is needed, they will be communicated to the mosque. But the general policies come from Tehran, from the capital, to the cities, and what the leader says is repeated there, and it's done there.
Okay. Now let's go a little bit further into it, if I may. And that is that when these protests began, there were protests from what you would do, and I suppose any person in the office of any representative mosque person would know. So I'm not asking you anything special. You would have known that there are protests arising out of what happened, not only in your city, but in many other cities. Would that be right?
Everything was known. That's to say that you don't even have to go to the offices of the IRGC, because even the shopkeepers had closed down and had gone home, because they said we are going to have riots and the rioters are going to come to our shops.
So it was general knowledge.
Probably.
So that was the knowledge. We lost him. All right. Let's see if we can wait for him to come back. Is it okay? I need a bit more time.
ضعیف تو ایران و قطع
Sorry, the internet is not strong enough in Iran, so we are interrupted. If you could ask your question again, I will be grateful.
Microphone. Oh, sorry. I'm sure that the internet in my country is much worse than in yours, but let's not go there. We have to cope with it and see what we can do. So you say it was generally known, it was general knowledge of everybody that these protests were happening, and you'd go so far as to say that anybody who says that they didn't know by the first day that protests were happening all over would, in your opinion, not be speaking the truth. Would that be right?
Look, what I am saying is that people knew that there would be a protest in that connection, and they were after finishing them peacefully. But nobody knew better, that's to say, those who had experience, whether they were police force or the security force or the ones who had come from Tehran, those people knew how they would end. But people, the ordinary people, didn't know. They thought that 2 or 3 days they would be on the streets, they would back off from the decision, there would be no rise in the price of petrol, and it will finish. But those who had come from Tehran and those forces, they knew what would happen. So that's why people were caught. They did not expect it.
So what would the supreme leader and the representatives of the supreme leader in the country, as you understood it, they would have known how it was going to go, because if I understand your evidence properly, the response would not have been different, one response in place A, another response in place B. What happened?
They knew one thing. they knew one thing, that would finish it off at any price, and they were not afraid of the price. And what I told you, it was not to be a ceasefire, it had to be blood which was going to be shed.
No, I understand that. I'm asking you something slightly different, that I understand well. Was that general policy throughout Iran, or was it the policy particularly in your area as you understood it from the relationships?
نه.
No, the general policies, as I submitted to you, in a province like Khorasan or the province of Isfahan or the other provinces was the same. That's to say, the general trend was the same. And perhaps in our city was a little bit harsher or more serious, and perhaps a more determined order had been issued for our city.
Okay, and would it have been an unimportant matter, or in your opinion, you think it was important enough to have been discussed at meetings between the supreme leader and the provincial representatives?
نه.
No, I cannot respond to this question, no.
Okay, no, I think I understand. Oh, what happened?
This is not something that I exactly know. I don't know what kind of a response you're pursuing, but
All right.
I have previously given a response to this question. If it is very necessary, perhaps privately I can provide an answer to this.
No, don't worry, it's fine. It's fine. Your answer speaks for itself, and I personally am very comfortable with it. So that is fine. Let's go back to the safer topic of religious philosophy for a moment. There is a religious philosophy in which there is the thinking, and there are many places like that. Some places that I lived in years ago were like that too, that if you dispute what the leader says and does, a religious leader says and does, it is like going against God. It is against the religion, because the leader is a representative of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on this earth. Is that right? That is so. That the leader is supposed to be the representative.
کردم داشتم
I was telling you that in Quran it says that you have to obey God and His Prophet and the Imams, the Immaculate Imams, and those who are in command. And when we say mankum, it means the leader. So this is something that is also taught in all the high school books. That's to say, this is taught. But I have to tell you something.
Yes.
You are talking about a religious we are talking about political philosophy, and vis-a-vis that, we have also the Sharia philosophy, and at times the two are in contradiction. When we talk about the political jurisprudence, we have judicial jurisprudence, it always overcomes the political philosophy.
All right. So is it possible? I understand it, and I think it makes sense to all of us, but if you can demonstrate just by one example, however theoretical the example is. It doesn't have to relate to you, but show it to us with one example so that we understand it concretely, if you know what I mean.
An example in what connection? In the verse of the Quran that I just recited, or?
Yeah, a practical example of what you mentioned about the relationship between political philosophy and religious philosophy. That to some extent there is this interrelationship which can be complicated, as I understand you. And I wondered whether you would give us one example of this insofar as it pertains to Iran, if that is possible, without exposing yourself.
I will give you an example from before the revolution.
Yes.
From before the revolution.
Right.
The encounter of Dr. Mossadegh, who was a member of the National Front, with Ayatollah Kashani and those surrounding him. The ones close to him, and the documents that still exist talk about the coup that happened, and the riffraffs who were around Ayatollah Kashani acted, and Mossadegh was under house arrest. And after the revolution, you can see what is happening. You see Bani Saab, you see Dr. Kadi Var, you see Mousavi, who is under house arrest, etc., etc.
Okay, I'm sorry, but we need to leave the safety of theory for a little and talk about reality. A person in your position, and you mustn't talk about yourself, please, a person in your position in the office of the Ayatollah, and I want you to disregard the fact that you are related to him. We'll come back to that later if that has an impact on it. But generally, a person in your position, what would the duties of such a person be? And I am more particularly interested in, was it part of that duty to go to the jails? Was it part of that duty to talk to, generally now, not with you, everybody else, was it part of that duty to talk to people, to find out what's happening, and so on and so on? In very general terms, what are those duties and responsibilities?
This question of yours, I explained it regarding the responsibilities, the duties. I talked about the fact that these people at times go to the security forces places or military places and to report the shortcomings. The shortcomings that I am talking about are not the shortcomings which are contradictory to the Charter of the UN. No, these are the shortcomings as compared to the Islamic Sharia. And if there is any shortcoming, any inconsistency, then it has to be communicated to the Imam Jum'eh. And then it will go to the capital, and then he will be notified that he has to improve them and correct them, and if not, he's going to be discarded from his position. That's to say, when you go to inspect the the detention centers, prisons, etc., they have to be conducted and run in accordance with the Islamic Sharia. That has to say they have to recite the Quran, they have to say the prayers or any other trend. That trend has to be followed. This has nothing to do with the UN Charter of Human Rights, etc., etc. We are dealing with the Islamic Sharia, which for them is beyond and much higher up than the UN Charter and the Geneva Convention and all of that.
I understand that completely. Believe it or not, there was a time when I thought that as well. But let's go a little bit further. So it would have been part of the duty of a person like that. And you were just one of a number of people who did this job. It'd be part of the duty to get as much information as possible, and that's not a bad thing, and communicate it in the performance of your duty. And in the process of that duty, I suppose you would be told what the decisions have been from, excuse me, you would have been told, because it's a two-way thing, right? You tell, not you, let's say the person working in the office of the representative must tell the representative all that the representative needs to know. But it is not a one-way communication, because the representative then tells the person working in the office what they need to know, what the policies are, and so on, so that you can, the office person, the worker can report back to the Jome person in relation to what the policies are, what the situation is. Have I got it sort of right?
نه.
No. As an employee, consultant, or whoever who is working in the office, close or far, we cannot express opinion. We are just asked to go and take a look to see whether this work has been done or not. If it has been done, we say it has been done. If it has not been done, we say it has not been done. We cannot say that this part was done properly, this part was not. If an order has been issued from Tehran, they should just go and see whether it has been implemented or not. The other people, we should just see whether it has been implemented or not. And there is no consultancy, there is no expression of opinion, because if we express any opinion, then we will be sacked.
Okay, but that's fine. I understand that completely. I put my question badly. Let me put it a bit differently. The orders that existed in relation to the protest were known to you. And if that is yes, I'm sure it is, that you knew about what the orders were. And what you've been telling us about are the orders you knew about in the performance of your job. Am I right about that?
بله.
Yes.
Right. Thank you very, very much. You have been extremely cooperative, and thank you for being patient with me. It's very difficult to explain how helpful you have been. Thank you.
باش.
I had a few questions. I can't guarantee that they will be as philosophically invigorating as the last exchange we had, but I'll try my best. I think I just wanted to clarify a couple of things that you said that I found really interesting. You mentioned in your early account that the actions that were taken were based on a written order. Are you able to provide any details of what you meant by that? Was it a written order that was sent down from Tehran, or was it a written order at the provincial level? Just a little bit more detail, and that would help me understand a little bit the chain of command. And I might ask one further question, if I may, within the same realm. perhaps you can help me understand a little bit better the relationship between the Provincial National Security Council, which I believe you attended the meeting of on the Sunday, and where that fits in within the structure that we're trying to understand a little bit better, and what that order showing up at that meeting meant, just so I understand a bit more the structure.
The order was in written form. It had come from Tehran. That was because the city was out of the control of its authorities and officials. So an individual brought this order in writing personally, and he said that you should implement this order and I will help too.
And this person brought it to the meeting you were referencing on the Sunday?
Yes.
Thank you. At another part of your testimony, you mentioned that things escalated very quickly, or I think you used the word erupted very quickly on Saturday. And you mentioned within that explanation that there was a burning of the banks. Are you able to provide a little bit more detail on that and how that escalation happened?
On Saturday, no place was burned. The burning started on Sunday after Ayatollah Khamenei made his statements. On Sunday, from 10 to 11 in the morning, the burning started. Ayatollah Khamenei made a statement, and afterwards everywhere was burnt down. The petrol stations, banks, and many other places were burnt down.
And what is your understanding for the reason for that? Maybe I'll be clearer. Why were those particular institutions targeted?
The places were burned were, for example, the banks. Well, nobody was shooting from the banks, so they burnt it down. It was easy to burn. But it was difficult to burn down, for example, the Basij Center or the IRGC centers, because they knew that the people would be killed from behind those doors. And the people inside those centers would have defended themselves, but the petrol stations were defenseless. The banks were defenseless. There were no officials inside, no persons inside to defend them. That's why people burnt those places down.
That's very helpful, thank you. And one final question. You gave a very detailed and clear description of the prisons. I just wanted to clarify, because you do say that you visited the prisons, but the descriptions you gave, were those based on things you saw, or were they based on conversations you had?
As I already mentioned, we went to a prison, and from the command room of the prison, we could see what was happening. We were seeing the corridors from the command room. We could see everywhere through the command room. There were camera monitors there, and the prison warden was explaining everything to us. We were only present in the command room of the prison center.
Thank you very much.
Could I pick up on a couple of issues to do with the burning? First of all, apart from banks, was anything else burnt?
خب دیگه مراکز که در
petrol stations, banks, police, weak police stations were being burnt down. Some of the religious centers were also being somehow affected. Or apart from the police stations and the petrol stations, there were some religious centers that were also affected.
Thank you. And in relation to the places that were being burnt, you made the point about the banks that there was nobody inside who could shoot back, and therefore they were effectively a soft target. But the places that were being burnt down, were there people inside them who were unarmed? Was there anybody inside them, or were they empty?
Well, there were the bank employees in the banks. They were unarmed, and they have filed complaints. I know that there had been some complaints that have been lodged by these employees before the courts. Their legal department has lodged some such complaints. Apart from the banks being burnt down, it has been said that the employees were there, and they were saying that, and the employees were told that if you're there, close the doors so that nobody would be able to come in. But since they saw that the banks were being burnt down, they left from the back door. And banks have two doors usually, a bank towards outside where the people went in, and since the bank employees saw that the situation was so aggravated, they just left from the back door and got on their cars and went away.
So as far as you're aware, everyone escaped out of the burning buildings. There was nothing to stop them leaving? The protesters didn't stop them?
The question that you're asking me is a bit revealing. I cannot explain. I cannot respond.
Well, just let me stop you. I'm not concerned with your area particularly, just what your general knowledge is about whether the protesters were targeting the people inside the bank, inside the petrol stations, or they were targeting the property. That's really the question.
Only state properties. If there were two cars, a private car and a police car, they would only have burnt down the police car. The people wouldn't have burnt the private car.
My question's a bit different to that. Were the protesters targeting the buildings, the vehicles, or were they also targeting the people within the buildings or within the vehicles? Was it just property or was it people?
No, mostly they were targeting property. But there were some cases that some individuals were also attacked. But it was very rare. They were not badly affected, at least.
And in relation to the shoot-to-kill policy, just so that we can understand this a bit more, what did the shoot-to-kill policy say? Was it, I mean, because there's various ways in which a shoot-to-kill policy could be initiated or implemented. What was the point of the shoot-to-kill policy, first of all? What was the overall objective, as you understood it?
They were trying to calm down the situation. So they believed that there was a religious duty to protect the establishment. So based on the state order, and the state order can only be issued by the supreme leader. So it was a religious duty. The establishment was endangered, and therefore everybody had a duty to stand against the enemy. And even if the enemy, and even if we use our lives against the enemy, if we lose our life, we would be martyrs. And therefore there was a religious order behind the order.
The essential idea was to clear the streets. Was that the essential idea?
بله.
Yes. To calm down the situation.
Do you know if there was any specifics of that order, i.e., was there a general decision about what the best tactic was, other than to shoot people and kill them? Was anybody targeted in particular? Was there a plan beyond that broad order?
نه.
No. At any price, at the fastest format possible, and in the shortest period of time, it was ordered to wrap up the situation. If you want to do such a thing in the shortest period of time and to calm down the situation, well, the cost for the people would increase.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. I think that's all the questions from the panel. Has Council any remaining questions?
No further questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Witness, for coming and testifying. I think your evidence has taken a long time and it's been very useful, and we really appreciate the effort you've taken to give evidence. So thank you very much.